six presenters tonight. I'm gonna go really quick, first and try and knock this one out. So this is Gyroscopic Stabilizers. So what the heck is going on here? That's Bruno Feduti. He's a board game designer who you might know from games such as Citadels, Ink and Gold, and Red November, which is a game about gnomes trying to hold together a submarine before it catches on fire and sinks. Quite good. So he said in a blog post, which I'll link at the end of this, there are two kinds of equilibrium in physics, stable and unstable. And what he was really talking about was game balance. So this is a talk or presentations about how you might balance a game using stable approaches and unstable approaches and what that means. So this is what I call the fruits of unstable equilibrium tree. So this is, I don't even know what game it is. I think this is Command & Conquer, one of the games. But I remember playing these games and I would just turtle in my base and build up a million tanks if I could, and then just rush them all into another player's base. And this generally worked, at least in our LAN party games. But this is kind of a big problem for a game at large, is to have this kind of strategy be effective, and that's just stupid looking. So, as a designer, you might try and figure out how to fix this, and one is, I know I'll make the tanks more expensive, and that'll fix the problem. And so then you start playing the game, and you see that there's 20 helicopters now flying around. So you fix the problem, but not really. So you have this is like how I would maybe visualize an unstable equilibrium. It's just everything is constantly at odds with everything else, and one small change is just going to require all this rebalancing of all these different numbers you're just constantly adjusting, and it's not really fun to balance. It's not that fun to play either, because you get in these situations where you have a very slippery slope. Just the players that are relatively equal, then one player gets ahead, and it just gets out of control. So a stabilizer is a mechanism in the game that will push against a player who's ahead, maybe, is one way to put it. But here's some examples. So many possible paths to victory. So a game like Civilization demonstrates this very well. So Civ 5, I don't actually play Civ 5, but I play the board game version of it. And so Civ 5, the video game, has 5 different paths to victory. And so you might be in a situation where, yeah, look at, I built 20 tanks, look at me. And then I kind of say, well, too bad, because I built my Sphinx and now I won with the Sphinx. So it punishes a player just who's focusing too narrowly, and requires you to interact with the other players at all times. So multiple paths to victory are something that Civ uses, and a lot of board games use multiple paths to victory. A lot of the Euro game style games, to good effect. So another one is the last player advantage, rubber banding. It feels artificial, but is quite effective, as we know. I stole that from some image online, but I thought that was funny. So to give maybe a concrete advantage, a concrete example of how you might make the last player advantage not feel artificial, is to make it part of the mechanisms to rather than just a button I press to fire blue shell to punish the first player. If instead part of the mechanisms of the game, I'll get to what the hell's going on here. That's not just arbitrary. If part of the mechanism of the game are what gives the last player an advantage, it feels a lot better. So in a hypothetical game where you have to race with a bunch of books on your head, and the player with the most books on their head gets more points, the player who has less books on their head has a natural advantage in the game, because they could just punch the other player right in the stomach, and it's going to be hard to react to that type of thing. So that's in this totally made up example that I was trying to figure out about 1 a.m. last night. Putting books on your head to score points in some way, it's harder to balance more books, but that gives you more points, so then a player who has less books has an advantage. Totally contrived, but that's something. And this is my favorite, vulnerability. So I'll just get into the example, because it's probably going to take a while to explain. So I always have to reference Netrunner, because it's just my favorite game right now. But it's a card game in the vein of Magic, but much, much better. Don't play Magic, this is better. Anyway, so there's runner versus corp. Asymmetric game, attack defense. If the runner has a lot of credits, a lot of money, the runner is in a good position. He has a very good board state. Built up a lot of money. So what is the corp going to do to win? So on their last action in their turn, the runner might run into a server, feeling totally happy. They have all this money, what could go wrong, And unfortunately, they run into a card like Ghost Branch, which is a trap that gives them this tag, which is just a token. It's just a word. They have a tag now. And because they came in on their last action, they can't get rid of that tag. That could be bad for them. An example of how that could be bad is there's a card in the game called Closed Accounts that the corp can play to clear out all their money. So now they have no more money. So where one player had an excellent board position, they had all the money in the game, feeling great, because they played it a little too risky, because they didn't play conservatively when they had that advantage, the other player was able to take advantage of it. So I know that might not make total sense, but just the idea that just because one player had a big advantage, they were still vulnerable in other ways. So the effects of vulnerability, which are already covered. A player with an advantage must play conservatively in order to maintain that advantage, thereby giving other players potential to have an advantage. A losing player can make a risky play with a potentially very high reward in order to make a comeback. So to kind of summarize, benefits of stable equilibriums are you can add more mechanisms with that with less worry. So where usually you have to worry about what is adding this rocket launcher going to do to the game? You know, how am I going to have to adjust a shotgun and this armor and et cetera, et cetera. You can kind of just, let's add it in and, you know, we might need to tweak something, but it's going to work. And comebacks, they allow for comebacks, where before you have 50 million tanks coming in your base, you can't do anything. It's not fun for either player. So just allowing comebacks it's fun for both players. Just if I'm winning, to know that the other player can come back and win is very important. And something I think you see a lot in stable equilibriums. So it allows for really powerful plays without unbalancing the game. As in that example, where just clearing out all your money. If you make one small mistake, I got you. And so just some more on this. Fududi talks about this a lot better than I can in a very long blog post. So you can just Google Fududi balance. And then I wrote more about Netrunner and vulnerability there. So that's it. Thanks.